Today, I want to welcome Olga Pechnenko. Now, it's a mouthful. She grew up in Kazakhstan. Well, she was born in Kazakhstan, grew up in Russia. There's a story there. And she always wanted to come to the US. She saw it as the land of limitless opportunities. And she moved here when she was 19. And although she's from Russia, she is an American patriot, more than I could express. If I pull the pin on that, it's just going to explode in the most amazing way. She loves America, but she wants to see Americans achieve their full potential. And that's really what drives her. I've known Olga for a while, I think before we even realized we knew each other. And so I'm really excited by this conversation. Olga, welcome.
Me too. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I think we figured out that. So when you say you're from Russia, so let's boil down a couple things. You're from Kaliningrad. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, Kaliningrad.
Okay. That's a weird chunk of land that most Americans have no idea exists. Where
No.
is it?
So it's up, if you look at European map, it's right next to Poland. So it's between Poland and Lithuania, that little enclave or island that is not connected to Russia. You have to cross a couple borders to get to Russia. So sort of like Alaska is not connected to America, but it's part of America. But you have to go through Canada to get there. So that's kind of how Kaliningrad is. So it's not as big as Alaska at all. It's tiny. It's 1 million people there. It's teeny, but it's on the Baltic Sea, and it's a very important port for Russians that we got after the Second World War.
Okay, so let's talk about that. It's an important port. Why is that?
It doesn't freeze during the winter, so it never freezes, and that's very important because all the ports up north, they freeze, and that's the only one that does not in that area of Russia.
It's something we take for granted. America has ports on both oceans and they don't freeze. And we don't even think about it. We just assume that this is normal. Why is a port important?
Oh my gosh, for goods and trade and now with everything that's going on in Russia, that's like a way for Russians to get stuff from Russia to Russia and back, because you can't really cross the borders that freely with all the shenanigans going on there right now. And so yeah, so it's important part of trade for Russia for moving goods and be part of the economy in the world.
And I think one thing that I wish Americans thought more about when we're setting foreign policy, and we're not going to go down the whole political route,
No.
but one thing I wish Americans thought more about is we need to think about, if we want peace, we want people to have access to ports. When we cut off ports, that's destructive to peace. We don't think about that because of the amazing resources we have in this country and the abundance of ports that never freeze. But that's an important thing.
It is very important, especially in the winter or the times when things get really cold in Russia. So
Yeah. So, but now so you were born in Kazakhstan.
hmm
And again, just for those that are a little sketchy on their geography, where is Kazakhstan?
So Kazakhstan used to be number two country size-wise in USSR and former USSR, and it's right underneath Russia. So if you look at the map, it's that big chunk of land that is right under Russia that's called Kazakhstan, next to Mongolia and other countries on the other side. So and Kazakhstan has a lot of oil and gas or gas. I mean, one of those, and that's why Russians were very interested in developing that country. And that's why my family, my grandma, was moved there to help develop and kind of industrialize that part of the USSR back in the day. So that's how we ended up there, or my family ended up there.
And a lot of Russian rockets, space rockets are shot out of Kazakhstan, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not as versed on Kazakhstan as I'm on Russia, but I believe so because I left when I was about 11, so I don't remember other than our national leaders changing. I don't remember much about it. And the winters were cold.
So when that happened, that was like the first major disruption in your life. And again, I think this is going to be a little surprising for an American listener. You were born in Kazakhstan, and then the politics changed, and
Yep.
then that impacted you. What happened?
Well, I'm a technically, even though I was born there, I'm ethnical Russian. And in that part of the world, your kind of nationality is defined by your parents, your dad mostly. And so when you're ethnic something, the groups there are not as after USSR broke up, there was a lot of conflict. And so my dad decided with three daughters, it was safer for us to leave and start a life in Kaliningrad. And that's why we had to leave because of all the unpleasant things we had to deal with as ethnic Russians while we lived there, which
Yeah.
I don't want to go into the detail on that, but it was not very pleasant.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember that. I remember going to school and being threatened and you know kicked and it was not fun. Go back to your country. That's what they used to tell me.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yep. So that's why we moved and we started with nothing. So we went from very cushy life. I remember my childhood was very happy and cushy and just delightful. We met and we moved to the house that had an outhouse. We didn't have running water. We just basically had electricity in the house and not very safe to run electricity to warm you up during the Russian winter. And so we had no gas, we had no running water, no bathroom. And, in one of those winters, I was outside in the middle of the winter, in the middle of the night, and I was just like, this got to be a better life. And I think that's when my journey started.
Yeah.
I wanted a better life than that.
Well, we're happy to have you here in America because when I talk to you, every time I talk to you, I walk away so energized because I hear hope, I hear, just optimism and belief in the greatness of America and everything that you say.
I mean, that's why I came here, and I came here with nothing. I came here with $100 when I was 19 years old. And I just believed that I could do anything here. That's just how strong American image was because America is the land of opportunities. And it worked out for me, and I wanted my kids, and I was 19. Like, who thinks about kids when they're 19? But I knew I wanted my kids to have these opportunities and to live here. And that's why I took the risk. And my whole family is in Russia, and I came here, and here I am. Huge, huge believer in American dream. That's really what drives me every
Wow.
day.
Well, one of the things when we started talking, we connected here in the last several months, and when we were talking, I started thinking, I was like, wait a minute, there's not that many Russians in Austin.
No.
And I asked you, I said, do you know a guy named Pyotr Belov? And you're like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And we started talking about the Wizard Academy, which is a place that I met Pyotr. And, and all of a sudden, I remembered meeting one of Pyotr's friends, a couple years ago, who was from Kaliningrad. I'm like, okay, there aren't that many Russians in Austin, probably not that many from Kaliningrad. I think we met years earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. I get probably this is a small world.
Yeah. So, well, very cool. And so, what, in coming to America, what would you say has been your biggest surprise?
Um, that it's true. It's true. It's true that as long as you're willing to put work and focus and energy into something, everything is possible. Like as a woman, as a young woman who came here, I knew just one family here when I first came here. And from there, truly, if you're open, if you're curious, it's everything they say. If you're just willing to work for it, and I'm not necessarily saying that the hard work or whatever, I'm just saying truly put yourself out there and be curious and put the effort into it, put the energy into it, and really care about helping others, like this country will give you everything. I mean, I've got introductions. I was able to live in the place for free for a couple months when I first came here. Like people will just do things for you if they're just see that you're onto something. Like they want to help you. And now I understand. I'm like, oh wow, now it makes sense because it's refreshing to see that. It's awesome. And so that was probably the most surprising thing for me. But like the obvious things, I expected more cowboys and more cacti and things like that in Texas. Then I didn't really see that much. But like, in general, it's just surprising to me that everything I grew up to believe in was true when I came here.
Oh, that's so awesome. So, how did you master English? Because what I've observed is if somebody moves to the US before they're 10, they they have a very natural American accent. And you have an accent, but it's not much of an accent. And obviously there's something you've done that's enabled you to just be very masterful in English, not only accurate, but with a very clear, understandable accent. How did you do that?
Well, that's a good question. My mom put me in the experimental class when I was 6 in Russia, in Kazakhstan, and we had to learn German. And then in 5th grade, they added English. And when I moved to Russia, they only had one language, so I had to pick. And I remember thinking, obviously German, I took it for longer than English. And I was like, you should probably go with German. But then something inside of me said, but English is so much prettier. No offense to German language at all. And to me, English is more logical. I'm very math driven. And to me, there's more logic in English. And so I was always an A+ student on the language side. And then because of that, I won this competition at 15 that US government, I believe Clinton, who made this program, he very smart guy, because he basically made this program where he would take for a year exchange students from Russia and former USSR countries, and he will bring them to America for free for a year to live as an exchange student. And then you go back and tell everybody how awesome America is. And so I came here for a year when I was 15 to North Carolina. I lived with a host family. And I remember I told myself, don't speak to any Russians while you're here for a year. So I could learn the actually conversational English, not just the textbook that I knew, but actually speak like Americans speak versus me being safe with Russians that I could find and feel safer with, or speak Russian more. So I didn't speak Russian at all that year.
Wow.
So
Where in North Carolina were you?
Durham, North
Durham.
Carolina. And
Oh,
and
yeah.
I still, my host family is still in my life. They're just incredible, incredible people. And I'm very thankful they took me in, because that's where I saw the opportunity, truly, of what's possible for a woman here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's cool. I used to live in Raleigh and I would go to Durham Bulls games, and
There
that's
you go. I
big part.
remember that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yep. It's so beautiful over there. It's gorgeous.
Yeah. So, so now you run a company called Revenue Hire. And
Mm-hmm.
what is that? What do you guys do?
So the revenue hire is really was I founded the revenue hire because of my own pain in the past. And my big pain in the past was I used to run a translation company where it was a multi-million dollar business that I actually started as an intern, and then I became the CEO at 24. And so I was super young running the company, and I read all the HR books on how to hire people, and it worked on every position except for sales. I made three, I mishired 3 sales teams. And it wasn't until I learned how to hire right. I worked with Sandler consultants that taught me how to do sales right, how to kind of hire right and all that stuff, that it started clicking for me. But that was after 2 years of mistakes of mishiring sales teams. And that cost the company a lot of opportunities, money, resources. And I was like, why is this so hard? Why is this? It should not be this hard. And this is my talent. Anytime I realize something is too hard, I know there's got to be a solution for that. And I went and found it, figured this out. And when the company got sold, I started Revenue Hire to help other growing companies to not have this pain of mishiring salespeople. Because everybody's great on paper. I remember the stack of resumes would go this high, and I'm like, who the heck is good and who's not? How do I know? And I figured it out. And so that's why I wanted to start doing this for others and actually do the service for them, so they don't have to make this painful mistakes that could cost millions of dollars in revenue every year.
So what's the formula? I mean, what did you learn in that process? What were you doing right and what were you doing wrong?
You basically have to do everything the opposite, what you typically do with regular positions. So usually in the typical hiring process, people, you have a way to see if they're telling you the truth. You have the credentials, you have the certificates, you've got education, you can give them a project, like a test project of some sort. You can tell. It's pretty easy. On sales, you can put anything on your resume, and it doesn't mean that's true. There's no sales degrees, there's nothing like that. And so what I found was you have to interview salespeople like you would do a sales process. And they got to sell to you without knowing they're selling. And so what we do is we look at 3 my scientific process is we look at three different things. Their sales DNA, which is like, are they wired to be in sales? Then their sales skills, which have to match the job description. And then do they have the work ethic to produce results? A lot of people would do CRM updating in the middle of the day. That's not really producing results, right? And so like the work ethic has to be like, you got to be smart and you got to work, with a lot of focus on what you need to accomplish versus just doing the busy work. And so most companies interview for sales skills. We interview the whole three. The sales DNA is the hardest. That's the thick skin, how well you handle rejection, how well do you build rapport. That's important. I mean, speaking of your book, right? It's kind of like, how are you showing up on the date? Are you showing up being rude and like somebody owes you everything? Or are you showing up to being curious and open to hear what the other person has to say? And a good salesperson, they adjust to the personality like masters. And that's what we're looking for. And our job is to vet them before we get in front of the client, so the client doesn't make the mistake of mishiring somebody who should never be in sales. So hopefully it wasn't too confusing, but that's sort of in a way kind of our formula, how it works.
I've got a buddy who's Mormon, and he was telling me once why Mormons were so good in business and especially sales. So Mormons, when they turn 18, they do a 2-year mission, and they go door to door every day, facing rejection for every day.
You have to. I mean, you have to be able to handle that,
Yeah.
And the question I always ask my clients that I work with is like, how do you test the rejection? Like how well will they handle rejection? Because if your prospect rejects them, is the prospect going to get angry emails from your salesperson? Are they going to get, manipulative emails? Like how are they going to handle it? Well, guess what? In the interview process that we do, like they show us the true colors. They show us everything. I've got hate mail, I've got name calling, I've got everything. And those are the people that are in sales. Like they should be the image of your company. And it's important to know what you need to stay away from, because people will show you everything.
So do you have one of these hate emails that you got? Do you have one that you framed that's your kind of
I should. I should. I try to move on. My thick skin is so thick that I just laugh at it and say, "Oh, thank you for showing me your true colors," and we just move on. But to me, it just means we're doing the good work for our clients.
Well, you've read my book, that Make Sales
Loved it.
Magical, that talks about how we use first-time offers. And it was funny. I had one guy I was talking to, was a financial advisor up in the DC area, and he was interested in some help in marketing. And we're sitting there talking. We have one call, and I was like, okay, well, the next step is we have this little mini project. And he looks at me and he says, "What? I have to pay money to spend more time with you? Don't you know my time is valuable?" And I was sitting there, I was smiling. I didn't get upset with him. I was like, "Thank you so much for letting me know how you value my time."
See, they show you. I love your book, and I'd love to have you on my podcast because I want to talk to you about it so much. But the fact that you have the criteria of who's not a good client for you, like they show you. The same thing with salespeople. They will show you they're not a good fit. If you're hiring a hunter and this person cannot even build the rapport with you and they're just showing up like that, why are you in sales? I don't care you hit 150% of your quota. Don't care. Have a conversation where I feel like there's energy flowing. And if it's not, why are you in sales? I mean, things like that just like, or rejection, like we put a little pressure on them and some of them hang up.
Wow.
What? Like that to me, I'm like, think about that person going and selling for you if they hang up on the interview. I'll just leave it right there.
Yeah. So when you're measuring the sales DNA, is that just an interview you do, or do they do an assessment, or is there
It's part of it starts with the moment they apply. And so we sort of, the second they show up, we have like 5 different paths it could go on. And so after doing this for many, many years, we already know if they start talking about that, they've got that weakness. If they start talking about that, they've got that weakness. And so sales DNA, it comes down to really, do they want to be liked? If they want to be liked, they show up as like, like they show up differently than if they've got kind of, if they don't know how to handle their emotions or they're out of whack, because that comes up as passionate, but it also will come up as soon as you cross some kind of line, they will get defensive or shut down or hang up or send you hate mail or, whatever. And so we kind of know the DNAs I actually really love Dave Curlin's work on that. He is very scientific when it comes to sales. And so I learned a lot about like what that should look like. And then it comes down to the mindset, right? And so it's kind of like, again, 11 years of doing this. It's been, there's a lot of things that we learned and implement.
So one of the things, so that's the sales DNA, and then you said
Sales
the
skills. So
sales
that's the
skills.
one. Yeah, because let's say you're hiring the first sales hire, which is something that we do very often. It's when the founder is sick and tired of doing themselves and they want to hire the first salesperson. And so they need to make sure the skill set for that person matches what they actually need. Like what they need and what they want sometimes are very different things. And so it's our job to make sure the sales skills align, because even if they have a great DNA, but they've never done that job before, you're hiring somebody to be a failure because they're not going to do a good job. So you have to know what the sales skills should be and then make sure you precisely matching that. So for example, if they've never been the first salesperson in the company and they've only been part of the big team, they're going to fail because they're used to having everything figured out for them. And a lot of times the founder will hire somebody's friend who's been successful at Dell or successful at this or successful at that. But then they come in and they're like, well, where's that? Where's this? And where's that? And where's that? Well, you got to figure that out, the playbook. Oh, well, I don't know how to do that or whatever. And so, and it just becomes a mishire after, the honeymoon of 3 months or whatever. And so that's important.
And then the work ethic. There was something you said that really surprised me. Was you saw it as a negative that they were updating the CRM. And so I'm a marketer. I'm like, oh no, don't stop them. Please have them update the CRM. But
we want them to update the CRM. I just don't want them to update the CRM during the hours they should be building relationships with clients. And so just to me, it's are you really working relationships? I update my CRM after I know my business hours are over, because that's when it's like, this is the non-revenue generating activity right now. So I got to do it, but I'm not going to do it when I could be selling or building relationships or reaching out to somebody or like doing things. And so it's kind of like measuring, taking long lunches or showing up to work late or just like making doctor appointments in the middle of your day or things like that, that you just know, like you got to be smart about how you budget your time for the results that you promise they're going to produce.
So one of the things that I've seen is a lot of salespeople just ignore the CRM, and the data is just corrupt. It makes my job as a marketer hard because I'm trying to measure trends. I'm trying to figure out what activities we're doing are driving sales meetings and driving sales. And when the CRM isn't up to date, all my data is corrupt.
Well, did you notice I didn't say don't update it? I just said don't update it in the time you should be producing. And that is important. And a lot of people, they think the busy work is the most important work. And to me, it's like, it just tells me if you're spending 4 hours every day from 8 to 12 doing, busy work without calling, building relationships, actually working the deals, how successful are you going to really be?
Yeah. No, and that makes complete sense. I've
It's
just
not
found
just part of
that
it. There's just one part of it. Obviously there's so many other things to it, but I'm just giving you an example of like what the work ethic actually is. Like if they hit their quota in the first week, are they going to stop?
yeah.
Most salespeople will. You will listen to the conversations and be like, well, I met the quota. And it's like, really? You don't want to keep going? Like that's what? Like things like that. So people will tell you so many things because they have no idea what the questions you're asking. They're expecting, tell me about yourself. They're not expecting the questions we're asking. And so we catch them in their true raw state of like the answer just coming out and showing you the world.
So here's something maybe you can explain to me, because I found that a lot of sales guys don't like to update the CRM. And I get your point about you don't want them doing it during the revenue hours. But I've run into some that it doesn't matter what time of day, they're not updating the CRM.
That's not a good salesperson.
It's not, oh,
Because you
oh,
know what? The good salespeople, you know what they love more than anything? Numbers. They love seeing like I cannot go fast enough once my day is over to go update my thing in terms of like my pipeline and this and that. Like salespeople, they talk about numbers, they talk about stories with numbers. There's no vagueness, there's no numbers, numbers, numbers. They love to, and it's not bragging. That's just how they tell the story. And in fact, that's a very telling sign when somebody doesn't want to tell you about the numbers or what the pipeline is or what the close ratio is. And how are they going to know all of that if they're not tracking that in CRM? So like they've got to do that. And that's one of the questions, you know, that we ask. Like, tell me about this. What are you doing? What's your habits? And this and this and this and this. And again, you know, some companies may have a different, you know, expectations. I've just noticed that those who prioritize revenue generating, but then they still do the housekeeping, those are the successful ones. But the ones who don't keep track of anything, they're not competitors. They're not going to be competitive in sales, which is one of the biggest traits, especially in hunters.
wow. So here's something else. I'm interested in your take on this. Obviously, I'm a marketer, and sales and marketing are like cats and dogs. We just, you know, we're upset with them, they're upset with us. From your perspective, what's the source of that tension and how do we work through it?
I think from what I've seen, again, it's a great question, but I feel like marketers, a lot of times when people hire salespeople, they expect them to be marketers. And a lot of times people hire marketing people, they expect them to be salespeople. And they're just like, it's two different functions. You know, marketing has to drive leads, and then salespeople obviously have to qualify and close the leads. You know, that's in the perfect world. And I feel like the tension that I've seen between the two, it's like when the KPIs are not clearly defined, and when the salesperson doesn't have a process. That's the most. So we have some clients right now, they're paying a ton of money to get leads and then not being converted. Well, there's going to be tension. Marketing is going to be hating that, right? And in fact, they do. That's why they're hiring us, because they're like, what's the problem? Well, the problem is salesperson cannot qualify the leads and they're messing them up and then they can't close. And then who the finger is pointing to? Oh, marketing gets me bad leads, right? And so it just becomes a circle, a vicious circle of, if the salesperson, which most salespeople are not great, I have to tell you, 80-20 rule works everywhere, right? And so I mean, majority of them should never be in sales. And then if you get the bad apple trying to convert your salespeople, convert your sales leads, and they can't, then all the efforts you're spending on marketing is just, it makes me so enraged when I see that problem. You know, it comes down to sales skills, to kind of like, how well do you know how to do your job?
Yeah, and you know, it's funny. At some point in a relationship with the client, we always have client come back and say the leads are no good.
Yeah.
And I had a client tell me that, you know, a couple of years ago. I said, you know, so far 100% of clients get to this point. Let's look at the leads. And you look at the leads and you're like, why did this person never get a call or an email? Um,
Whew, calm down, Olga. Exactly. Because they don't have the work ethic required, or they don't have the thick skin, or they don't have the sales skills required to do the job. I see this so often, like 99% of the time. Companies just have either a weak sales process, or they have a sales process no one follows, and it becomes this chaos. Well,
yeah,
if you don't like, I mean, if you change a tire, there's a process in the tire shop. It's going to be the same thing, hopefully over and over and over. I know you have a process of doing your first time offer. You talk about the process, but you have a process. Most people talk about it, but they don't follow the process. And how can you improve anything if you don't have it, you know?
have a process, have a playbook.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, and the playbook's very specific. It's like, and you know, and we share the playbook with clients, and sometimes I wonder, I'm like, if you were closing deals, I'd understand why you didn't want to try our playbook, but you're not closing deals. Why don't you try this playbook? It's proven.
Yep. Yep. I mean, it's to me, when people come to us, they're like, we've tried this, we've tried that. And I'm like, but tell me about your process. Like, what do you actually do to hire these people? Well, you know, I'm great at this. I'm like, well, if you were great at this, like you wouldn't be having a problem. So like walk me through that. And then they start walking me through it. And it's like they have no process. It's just they're hoping. Right. And then if that's the process for hiring, they're going to hire somebody who's going to be hoping to close deals down the road. And then the question is, why are you even wasting money on marketing?
Yeah. Well, and that's the hard thing for me is because we work hard at what we do. And, of course we get paid for it, but I'd like to see, like more than pay, I'd like to see the results. I'd like to see businesses changed because of our work.
Right.
And we had a client was one of the ones that said, the leads are no good. When we brought them on, they had a 30 to 33% closing rate, which seemed respectable. And I remember as time started progressing and we're ramping up our marketing program, I remember talking to the GM. I said, I think your closing rate's dropping. And he's like, no, 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 no. We have the best sales guys in the business. And then I got a little bit more data and the closing rate had dropped down to the low to mid 20s. And then some more time passed and I said, I think the closing rates, and we actually eventually made a dashboard that, because they had a long sales cycle and
Well, but
it's a
what
little bit.
happened? Like, do you know what happened?
I know this, they went from a closing rate of 30 to 33% all the way down to single digits. While a couple things happened. One is when, in there, of course, was, well, the leads are no good. I'm like, these are people filling out a 3-page web form. These were
Yeah.
leads that were coming. We're not talking about somebody gave their name and phone number. They filled out a 3-page web form. That was painful. And
Yeah.
those, right,
Amazing.
right. I was like, that's pretty high qualification there that they took the time to fill out a 3-page form. But one of the things that happened that I found out kind of late before we moved on from them was at one point the GM paid the sales guys more for leads that they found than if they used one of our leads.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that's quite something.
And I told him, I said, you created an internal competitor to us. He's like, oh, no, I didn't. They're professional. Like, they're humans.
This makes me so mad. So when we talk about companies, so one of the things that most companies get wrong with sales people, do you know what that is?
What?
It's compensation plans,
Yeah.
right? Exactly to your point. And they complicate them so much. And then they don't. So my two rules for any compensation plan, if anybody's listening, I hope this is my big valuable thing for y'all. When you do compensation plans for salespeople, there's just two rules to follow. It has to be easy for a fourth grader to understand. So it has to be super easy. And the second one, it has to align with the company's goals. So in
Yeah.
your case, if they hired you, they paid money for your services, the company said this is important to us. Clearly, they're spending money with you, but they're now saying these leads are not as valuable as those leads. So, like, it's whoever did that created this huge misalignment on the goals between the personal goals because they will go and close the deals that they find because they get paid more. I mean, that's just the human nature versus
Right.
the leads that are coming from you where they don't get as much. And so another thing I see very often is that they have a quota based on the new on the business. Like this is your quota, $1 million, but they don't specify it has to be new business every month or new accounts every month. And so that way it's constant drive and constant revenue generation versus just like I hit my quota, I'm done, after 6 months. And then you are just like, what's happened? And so alignment is everything. And what a great story. I'm going to use that story with my clients. Like, please don't do that.
So let's recap on the 3 things. When you're looking for an ideal salesperson, it's sales DNA.
They gotta have the right sales DNA, like how they built has to be as a salesperson because a lot of people are not built to be in sales. They're just not, and so
Okay.
how they build the we call it sales DNA, sales talent. So it's what, sales is a profession. So do they have the skills and the talent, sales skills of like actually do the job, and if they're too junior, you probably shouldn't hire them for, something where you don't have the training for them, right? And if they're too senior, maybe don't hire them to do a junior job. I mean, vice versa. So sales DNA, sales skills, and then the work ethic. And so those are the kind of 3 things that we evaluate in every interview we do, which I recommend about 3. And so there's got to be a process for all 3.
And one of the things that you said in the green room that I just love so much is this is important because if you don't get it right, your company, it's essential to the life of your company. And it ties in all the way back to your origin story. You came to America because you think America's a great place that has opportunity. If you squander this opportunity and you don't get the right sales guys, you're squandering the opportunity that America's given.
Exactly. And I mean, I couldn't say it better. Like, I know in your book, you talk about beliefs, and there are a lot of times, whoever you work with, they sometimes have to change their, I think you call it bias. So to me, it's like a belief system about something. And so if a company has been stuck at the same revenue level for years and years, there's clear, and they want to grow. It's one thing if you don't want to grow, but those people don't come to us, right? But if you want to grow, there's clearly something wrong with how your sales is structured. I mean, there's obviously could be other things, there's product, da da da. But my point is with revenues, like if you're not growing, there's a problem with your sales team, with your revenue generation team that doesn't do a job for you that they need to do. And you need to relook at that and be honest with yourself and say, I need help. Like what, how can I fix this? And so, because you can throw all kinds of leads at them, but if they don't know how to convert them, it doesn't really matter. It's just going to be, burning money.
I love your process. How do people reach you? How can somebody reach you?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So find me on there. And then my website is revenuehire.com. And I know you care a lot about impact, and me too. And so if if you go to my website, there's a little thing that you can download, and it's all free for you to kind of get that process going of, if you've been making mistakes, I'm giving this to you to go and review this little PDF. It's a 3-page PDF that'll kind of walk you through where you're making the mistakes so you can stop bleeding revenue or, reputation or whatever that is. And so that's going to be, I guess, my little gift to whoever's listening to us and who's sick and tired of not growing. Go and check it out. So my website, revenuehire.com.
Okay. And it's Olga Pechnenko, and that's spelled Pechnenko.
That's correct.
All right.
You got it.
Olga, thank you. This has been such a fun conversation. Thanks for sharing it on Leaders and Legacies.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was fun.